Welcome to the Context Machine, episode 707. Max, I'm Bryan Chaffin.
And I just have to point out, if you flip 707 over, you get lull, which does seem like an appropriate commentary about us in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm Jeff Gamet, and we have a website, contextmachine.io.
Whoa. You can use contextmachine.io to reach out to us. You can find us on Mastodon at Context Machine or Blue Sky at Context Machine, bsky.social. Ichabod had to chime in. And this is a world-breaking announcement. You can write us at podcast@contextmachine.io.
Wow, that's super exciting. Podcast@contextmachine.io.
Yeah, brand new. Very new.
Cool. Very cool. Hey, also cool, MacPaw is our sponsor today.
Excellent. We're going to tell you more about them in the show, but first we have a guest today. Everybody, it's John Kheit.
Hi, fellas.
John.
Hey, John.
Nice to be here.
Nice to be here.
Well, John, despite what Bryan is saying, I'm really glad you're here joining us today. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much, Jeff. It's always a pleasure to see the sincerity oozing off of you.
Yeah, we definitely drip sincerity. So John Kheit is here with us today because I guess it was technically last week. Anyway, whatever.
Just a few days ago.
Apple celebrated its 50th birthday. People started talking about there's the new book coming out. I didn't do any homework, so I don't remember what it's called. What's it called?
Steve Jobs in Exile.
That's the old one, isn't it?
Well,
anyway, whatever.
Once again, people, top men.
There's a new book coming out about Steve Jobs during his days at NeXT. And that got me thinking that we know somebody who was at NeXT when NeXT was a thing. And we should, we have talked to John and with John about minor aspects of that over the years, but I don't think we've ever actually talked to him about what it was like, living at NeXT, or I don't know, maybe he actually did that because it was Steve in the 80s. But I mean, what was it like in the day-to-day at NeXT and stuff? So John's going to tell us about that.
So before John actually does that, the book is Steve Jobs in Exile.
Okay, good.
Releasing in May 2026 by Jeffrey Kane. I accept your apology.
You have it. You have it sincerely. And we will probably end up talking more about this after that book comes out. Maybe John will even join us to talk about,
to tell us what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, probably. I'm thinking he'll focus on what's wrong, but that's just a guess.
It's more entertaining.
So anyway, John, talk to us about your days at NeXT.
Sure. Just one other bit of background. There aren't too many. It's weird that there aren't too many books or history or lore told about the NeXT days, because it's, in my opinion, the most interesting thing that ever happened to Steve Jobs, and no one cares. And I think all of us have probably read like every other, lore of Apple book out there, and that's always a black hole. But there's one other one called I Failed, which I have a lot of quibbles about as the best failure I've ever seen, by George Cummings. That's the true inside story of NeXT. I have not yet read this book, so I can't tell you if I recommend it or not, but it's one of the only other ones that at least claims to have done, to be about those years. And it's from, someone that claims to be an insider. So there you go.
That was one of the things that actually got me thinking about having you on is this book coming out made me think about the fact that basically exactly what you just said. There's been so little attention paid to Steve Jobs during his next exile. And the same lack of attention has been given to Apple's own clone days. I don't think either topic has ever gotten the true attention that it deserves. Most of the attention has been about Steve before he got kicked out of Apple, and Steve after he came back to Apple, and those, and there's definitely been lots of attention spent on John Scully while Steve was out, and there's been some amount of attention paid to to Gil Emilio's days and the Diesel's terms, the Diesel's turn at the head of Apple, but no one's focused on the Clone Wars and no one's focused on NeXT. So I thought we could maybe shed some light on that.
Yeah, it's. I've spoken with some of my old bosses, and unfortunately, my actual direct boss has passed away recently. C-Mac, he's a real wonderful fellow. But anyway, and I asked, especially there is a person that made the next Apple deal work, and he's little known of. I mean, people know of him. He's still there at Apple, and at least last time I talked about this with C-Mac a few years ago, so he didn't really want to. He's like, I'll give you his name and stuff, but I was going to talk because he's still there, so that's part of the issue. But yeah, I would have thought that maybe the Dave Pogue book would get into it, but from what I've seen on interviews, he said he really didn't get into the next days there, which is kind of interesting to me. Mm-hmm. But this is the way the lore is set up, and maybe it'll set up a context for the conversation. Is Steve Jobs really sucked as a businessman before he got kicked out? I mean, literally got, he claims he resigned. I'm sure he did.
He did technically resign, but
it was very mutual.
He was forced out, and he chose to resign.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he had good reason. Like, he set up the company, and he was not, I don't think he was ever CEO during those early days. It was always somebody else. And it was mostly because he wasn't very good at managing people, at least if you believe the tales and the lore. And I think at least some of them are probably, true. So how do you go from being like the worst business person ever to he comes back, and there's a lot of history once he comes back, one of the greatest businessmen and the greatest comebacks of all time. And actually, there's also plenty of lore on the Pixar days. There's a lot of, and I've read books on those. So that's all there. So it's very clear that he went from awful to pretty darn good in those next years. And yet, no one really was curious enough to investigate it. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, same.
So the early days of NeXT start. Now, I wasn't there from the get-go. I started at NeXT. It was in like 91-ish to 93. And after that, I left and I joined a research institute doing brainwave pattern recognition software, which is a whole other tale, but it involved NeXT stuff. So I had a particular skill set by that point. And I didn't have a very glorious job. I got a job as probably the lowest level grunt you can get at NeXT, which was the campus consultant. But it was kind of a really cool role because we were almost paid to exist, which is a job I had several times in the computer world. That when I was a little kid, I got paid by a company called Prodigy Computers, and before that, we got free software and stuff to hang out at the Radio Shack because the salesman loved having this idiot kid, because they're like, see, this idiot kid can use it, so you can use it too, right? So they basically paid me to exist and steal and thieve software nonstop, right? That's like every cent I made was to buy blank floppies to steal software, which was interesting because I had no computer, but still, I was dreaming.
But you were ready.
I was ready. Should it happen? Yeah. And so the campus consultant gig was basically kind of a marketing gig almost, in that you're helping promote NeXT stuff on campus. Because of it gave me access to everything though. So I did some programming on some software that NeXT was. There's a pretty good story about that, and it was my only encounter with Steve.
Yeah,
that is a funny story.
That's a story we've talked about before. We can definitely revisit it, but
I wasn't there. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't there during the very early formation, which was around 85, and there is like one documentary about that shows it, but it's a Steve PR polish piece, so there's very little truthiness probably to that. So by the time I got there, it was before NeXT gave up on hardware, and so there's some real awful hard. I think one of the things that nobody writes about is that he didn't necessarily start out great at NeXT. Like it was, a bruised ego and a decent amount of money that he cashed almost all his, except for one share of Apple out, and put in every cent he has. And in this way, he and actually Elon Musk have a weirdly coincident history. Things were going really bad for NeXT for a while. Like it couldn't find its niche. It's kind of like the Apple Watch history, right? Like they made a product, they weren't really sure what the heck it would be good at, and they kind of put it out there and saw what it was good at, right? And it turned out to be health for the Apple Watch. It was that way also in the early years with Apple computers. So like they didn't know what the thing would be, and it turned out to be VisiCalc, right? Like that blew up the Apple II sales eventually, and so they're like, okay, so there's some productivity stuff that may end up being something to lean in. And with the Mac, it ended up being desktop publishing. When they made the Mac, that didn't exist, and they kind of stumbled onto their niche. NeXT was having a real hard time finding that, and it eventually kind of sorted did. But the truth was, the real niche was Apple's failure to make an operating system ended up being that big opportunity. And everything we use today on the iPhone, every version of Mac OS and iOS is basically next step 5.0, 6.0, 7.0. It's all that. And it was the object-oriented core and some of the kernel work that was done by Avi that built this infrastructure that nobody knew what was good for. And there's still some stuff that was in the next version of the operating system that's still not in Apple's current OS that annoys me, because it's some amazing stuff.
Wait, what are we missing?
Some of this is minor, but some of it isn't minor. So one of the kind of minor things is we used to have something called, I think it was like a voice annotation thing where it was called lip service. And in email, you would just do a voicemail. And it was just the way it was integrated, and the UI of how easy it was to place made it pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But more major things was we had, and this is hard to conceive, we had real-time RenderMan, Pixar's RenderMan, built in to the operating system to the point where, how we have the space bar preview in the Finder, and you could just see, a Word doc. Certain formats are, I guess, conventional enough that you could just preview them, right? Like it's a no big deal thing. Yeah. 3D RenderMan images were that way in the Next Step Finder. It works.
Crap.
So, and he made it dynamic, meaning the way it was designed was the hardware wasn't particularly great back then. It was 68040 at the time when this was released, level hardware. But the idea is the better the hardware got, the more photorealistic the RenderMan. They were called RIB files, .rib files, RenderMan interface something blob, or I don't know what the actual acronym stood for, but. Yeah, that was a system level thing. The other, we had, it was forced away from the system, and it still doesn't exist, and you could kind of jury rig it into mail. But we had fast elliptical encryption emails. So you just click a little lock on your email, and it would encrypt, and the other person on the other side automatically had encrypted. Now you can kind of do that with some plugins with mail that are a total pain in the neck, and a GNU version. But this was, kind of very Apple-esque, seamless. You just click it and it was done. Yeah, the government really didn't like that at the time, because it was like nuclear level secrets that they didn't want other countries to be able to reverse engineer. So it was only like in a one beta version that I remember. I think I still have a copy of that beta version that it got released. So that was really cool. And one more thing is to not bore you, but this one was pretty cool. I like it. It was called dynamic object linking and dynamic objects. So it was kind of a long-term copy and paste, right? So you copy an image you're sketching and you paste it into your Word document, but then you go back to the image and you update it, and it will automatically update that into your Word document. And that would even work in real time, and it would work across the internet. Back when, the internet was not really a thing, because the internet was invented on NeXT in 91, I think, December of 91. Not the internet, sorry, the World Wide Web. So the internet obviously existed. But yeah, to tell you how early some of this stuff was, it's crazy. So all these things were chopped off because they basically said Mac users are so stupid and annoying, and they're so hugging to death their quick draw and other stuff that we have to basically placate them on some of this stuff and redo this in worse technology than the Cocoa stuff at the time. And so a lot of it went on the chopping block for some of those reasons. At least that's the feedback I've gotten from some folks that were there internally. So there was crazy stuff going on, and the company was filled with just very eclectic, diverse people. Like the fast elliptical encryption was done like by one of these top mathematicians that NeXT snagged in and got to work for them. And it was really groundbreaking stuff at the time, and it's still very serious levels of encryption that they developed there. So anyway, it was crazy. It was another version. And I don't think since then I've seen this in any company. It was the last version of kind of the Mac team, right? Like the Mac team, you had Bill Atkinson and Andy Hertzfeld and just crazy levels of the top artisans in the field all in one place. They weren't just A players, they were like super A players, right? And you had that at NeXT, but the difference at NeXT was it wasn't all on the comp sci thing. It was a bit more eclectic, where you had like I said, like these mathematicians and stuff too. It was a crazy place in that regard. And so I got to bump around on that. I got to play Doom before because it was developed on by ID on NeXT hardware. So my buddy Arvin and I played it before it was released on PC on the NeXT beta version across the network. So it was just really crazy, but also you kind of saw it going downhill because he got Ross Perot using his normal, force field of reality distortion to invest a huge amount of money at the time, and Canon to invest in the company. But the sales were bigger than they say they are. The old number is that they sold like only 50,000 pieces of NeXT hardware. That's not true, because there's a black hole of the NSA and other security, very off the books kind of stuff that went basically to do the early work on the stuff that later came out, where everyone's being snooped on. The DSP was kind of helpful at the time. Text to speech was early, but like there was all kinds of interesting things that were being used. What the heck was that program? It was like Ephion, or I forget the name of it. The early days but so it did go out into the government a bit more than the 50,000, but still, you're talking a very small number of hardware sales. And part of what is interesting there is he was faced with a failure in an operation with no safety net. There was no saving. He put it was all in, right? It was all in, and what little extra money he had, he bought Pixar for like I think 2.5 million or some absurdly low price from Lucas, who was going through a divorce at the time and was desperate to unload this thing that was never going anywhere. And he constantly butted his head into failure, even with Pixar. I don't know if you guys know, there was one other failed cube computer, not just the black cube at NeXT and the acrylic cube, G4 cube at Apple, but there was a pink cube at Pixar. And it was basically a glorified video coprocessor that you had to slap into some Unix box, into an existing massive Unix computer, and 3 maybe and a half PhDs on the planet could program this nightmare box. And Pixar would send those off, and Disney was like Disney and some government agencies were the only people that did that. But he thought that at one point the software was going to be the point of Pixar. Internally in Pixar, they had people that were hoping to do movies, and they were interested in doing that and got some awards for little shorts, but that wasn't the goal. That wasn't it. And when they integrated it into NeXT, the RenderMan stuff, they were hoping that would be a catalyst, to extend Pixar and get it to do that. But he just kept having bad failures of what's understandable in the early technology era. It's where he succeeded with the Apple II and they stepped into it. They stepped on a rake full of money with someone came out with Multiplan, and with the Mac with desktop publishing, and later on the watch into the health space. He couldn't find that for NeXT. And the absurd number of failures and pivots and repivots and the thickness of his skin that he developed through unbelievable failures, humiliating failures he built an early, like that today would still be an amazing fab. That was there's a video on the internet called "The Machine That Built the Machine" for NeXT computers, and it shows like no human hands were touching the development of the motherboard. They could pump out an absurd number of motherboards, and of course the irony is they barely made any computers. So that factory was basically just went to nothing. It was a huge investment. They resold it to Canon, and not resold. They sold it to Canon. I don't know what Canon did with it. Probably not much. So. Just these big dreams that the bubble is burst on them over and over. And then at one point he thought, we'll sell the operating system, and they wanted to sell it for, I think it was like $700 or $800, which was absurd at the time. This was, I guess, during the time when Windows NT was starting to really roll out, and from Vapor into a real product. And, he had bad deals with IBM to license the original version of NeXT 1.0, and IBM. This would be, by the way, a great historical computer.
Hey, hold on.
Go ahead.
We actually have to take a break for a sponsor.
Sure.
Yes, actually we do. And I'll talk about that. Our sponsor is MacPaw and Clean My Mac. And I think everyone knows that I'm all about keeping all my stuff organized. A big part of that for me is keeping everything on my computer, like uncluttered and cleaned up, and stuff I don't need to have isn't there anymore. That's where Clean My Mac's cleanup and cloud cleanup come in, because they go through and find all that cruft for you that's just taking up space, whether it's locally on your computer or on iCloud, OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, and let you get rid of all that stuff so that you can be more organized like me. And I would love for all of you to use Clean My Mac to get yourself organized as well. So here is what I need all of you to do. I need you to all get tidy today, and you can try 7 days for free with Clean My Mac. Use our code Context Machine. That's all uppercase letters. And you're going to get 20% off of Clean My Mac. Just go to their website. It's CLNMY, Clean My. It's kind of clever how they did that. CLNMY.com/Context Machine. Make sure that Context Machine part is all uppercase, just like the code, so that you can get your 20% off and get your Mac all cleaned up so that you can be more organized too. Thank you to MacPaw and Clean My Mac for being our sponsor this week.
Yes, thank you very much, MacPaw. We love those guys. We love that product. So, John, you were telling us I actually wanted to stop when you were talking about his failures because I felt like we should probably emphasize that. But you were moving on to their sort of attempted pivot at selling the operating system. But I also want you to tell us where this was. I mean, so like what part of the country?
Oh, I was working out of there's an office in Little Falls, New Jersey that they had, which is a beautiful office, by the way, nice in the woods. And their main operations was in New York, not New York, sorry, in California, not Ridgewood, something wood like that. Up in Northern California, and they had like a beautiful office where they had like an IMPay staircase built that was like absurdly overpriced, and like he overpaid for a lot of things, like the logo. He paid $100,000 to get the logo made by the same fellow that made the IBM logo. But that was the hub of NeXT. It was up in I keep forgetting the name. It's been so long. I should remember. It was etched in my mind for a while. But yeah, it was around the San Francisco area essentially.
Okay. Wait. So you lived here in California?
No. I worked out of in the New York, New Jersey area, and there was a place called Little Falls, New Jersey, which was it's very close to New York City. Where they had a beautiful office, and that's where I would work out of. So, when they had a Next World, kind of like a Mac World, and they'd put it on in New York and stuff, and so I'd help out for that. But I was mostly around the campuses around the New York, New Jersey area where I'd go to physically do work. But I did a lot of programming too. So, like, I made a product called CD Evil, which was, as far as I know, one of the first programs to rip pure digital audio off of a CD, because there was a bug in the Toshiba 3401 CD player that allowed for it. Back then, if you recall, in the 90s, the way that you played audio off a CD, there was this little audio cable that would go from the CD player to your sound card, and it would basically do an analog stream, and it wasn't really and you could record the analog, I guess, and digitize it, but you couldn't get the pure digital read off of the CD. So I made that while I was there.
The fact that you did that is just fracking awesome.
Yep.
Also, I believe you're thinking of Redwood City.
Redwood City. Thank you so much for scratching that that neuron that was going to bug me. Yes, Redwood City. Yeah, I did that. I did a bunch of little programs. It's funny, a lot of people there ended up being great programmers. Well, I don't know about great programmers. They weren't, any Andy Hertzfeld level, but Keith Ulfs, who designed, was a wonderful human being. He designed the UI for NeXT. In my opinion, still one of the best UIs, and much better than Mac OS. But he ended up writing a program called Image, which was like a Photoshop level thing before Photoshop became, as big a thing as it was, and in some ways better. And he did that while he was designing the UI, just because he needed tools to make the UI. So he made his own tools. A really cool fella. He passed away a while back. Very nice guy. I can't believe that more people. I think Microsoft hired him to make their failed web TV interface for a while. Not that the interface was a failure; it was the product that had the problem. But I can't believe that more people didn't throw gobs of money at this guy. He's super talented and little known. But yeah, they were guys. Please feel free to stop me and course correct anytime. But if with regard to the failures, even when they went to when they lost the hardware, that was a hard failure. That was a really big failure. They pivoted to making it, and they solved amazing problems along the way that everyone takes for granted now. But they said, okay, we're going to sell the software by itself on Intel. And for a while, they had no product. They stopped selling hardware. Had not finished Next Step 3.1, I think that was the first version that had Intel support. That was not out yet. So they had no product for over a year. which is really tough to make money when you have no product to sell for over a year. It was that the company survived is a miracle, right? And then they start selling it for like $800 or whatever, and it's not selling well.
Were they still selling leftover hardware during that time?
They kind of purged it. They had this, Jobs had this weird purge mentality that also I don't think was very healthy. If you recall the Sun Microsystem, Sun reselling system that resold the Lisas for a long time.
Okay.
Like Apple was disgusted with the Lisa and just purged it all, and they were reselling it through there, and then just like spitefully, despite sales going really well, they just buried a bunch into a garbage dump. So in a similar vein, a lot of the NeXT hardware was dumped on something called black hole computing, which resold it for quite a while, but they wanted nothing to do with it. So I'm sure they resold what they could at the end, but they were basically they didn't have a product for over a year to sell. And it's very similar to what happened to Elon Musk with the Model S. They finished selling the Tesla Roadster, had nothing. And because the designer, Fisker, screwed Elon and made the design he was supposedly making for Tesla, he ended up using for his own horrible company, even though it was a very pretty design, the Fisker Karma. It cost him over a year. So Tesla also didn't have a product for over like a year where they were finishing up the Model S. So a weird parallel there. But yeah, it's really rough to survive when you have no income at all. And they both managed to do that impressively. But even when they started selling the operating system, it didn't go well. That failed too. Then they started selling, and what started to make the company actually profitable, and they made some crazy tech that nobody remembers or cares about. WebObjects, some people remember about, but it was the development, but it was leveraged off the NeXT development environment, which was all object oriented, and again the basis of everything now. And Dell used it to make one of the first online computer purchasing websites. And that really took off for them, and they started to make money on that. And they even made this layer that nobody remembers. It was called, I think it was OpenStep for Windows, and it just like one of the amazing problems they solved when they got rid of hardware was they said we're going to make Intel, but we're also going to sell this operating system for HPA RISC architectures and Sun architectures, and they made the fat binary, and it always annoyed me when like developers talk about how difficult it is to convert their programs for the new chip architectures, because it's a lie. For the vast majority of them, you literally check a box for the extra compile targets you want and hit compile, and you're done. That's it. Like 99% of the time, that's it, unless you're writing some weird, optimized assembler code or other kind of weird code. So they made that like a nothing. And that was part of their shift that didn't save them. And then they made this layer called OpenStep for Windows. And just like you could cross-compile to a different architecture, you could cross-compile to this operating system layer, and you double-click a NeXT app, and it launches and looks like a Windows NT app. It's stunning. And it was released in a beta form for half of a version, and they pivoted away from it and said that they're not going to do that. But that was getting very close to the time of the buyout. But I could go on, like their list of failures was crazy, but here were the two things that made it interesting, and I think what developed him with this hardened skin and this unbelievable resolve that any lesser human being would have been crushed by, which is he failed, 30 times in spectacular format in this company. And not because he was a bad person or did whatever. It's just because it didn't work out, right? Like the market didn't pan out. The desktop publishing thing didn't manifest itself. It was so obscure that it was difficult to unearth that, web objects and making websites was going to be the thing that made some revenue for them and got them into, and they got into a positive revenue stream towards the tail end there. And but at that time he was already converting on the Pixar. He was going to get them public, and he basically become a billionaire through the Pixar IPO. So he wasn't but at one point, both companies were failing hard, right? And this guy put every last cent he had. From some of the rumors, like he had X amount left just for his family so that like they won't go hungry kind of level. But every last cent he put in to this, failure after failure after failure after failure. And every time he would pivot to find something new, he was just scrappy. And in that period, it honed him from the luxury of a lot of bad decisions, like, getting an IM-pay staircase that the business didn't really need, to scrapping for whatever he could get. From, you could tell if you watch some of the Next World keynotes, he hides it well, but for people that know him well enough, he was not really thrilled about DB-Kit and how it just with one click, could connect to a relational database in a way that was never humanly possible before, with zero code. And it was amazing but that wasn't necessarily lighting Steve Jobs's, internal flame, but he ate the poop, right? Like he muscled through it because that was making money. And so just like he had to keep, not only pivot and come up with new ideas, but he had to do stuff that he wasn't necessarily thrilled or excited about to get through it. And it's always this argument, like people say, some people are lucky and some people aren't. And I'm like, I'm a big believer that you make your own luck, in the sense that the more you work and prepare in advance, the more chance you have to convert on a lucky opportunity. And if you don't do anything and you have a lucky opportunity land in your lap, there's a good chance you can't convert on it and do anything about it. And so he made a lot of his luck in the sense that he just kept fighting through it and doing stuff that he needed to survive. And I think all of that was very much a crucible. And it made it, when he came back to Apple, despite Apple, he saw the gold, right? Like everyone saw Apple as a failure, and it was failing hard, but he saw all the assets. He saw the value. He saw the diamonds in the rough, super valuable people like Johnny Ive. He got good at that. He got good at clawing for things to survive in all those failures internally at Next. So
that's fair.
That's kind of my view on why he got good at it. It was the failure to find a good market quickly for a product that just was too difficult to get to, the industry to latch on to a third standard after Apple and Windows.
That's fair.
So really, he had to do his time in the crucible to really forge him into the person that could see the right decisions to make when he got back to Apple.
Yeah, and if you eat nothing but caviar all day, you're not going to necessarily notice that there's a market for Ovaltine or
tuna salad.
Yeah, or tuna salad, right? But when you're starving and you're scrapping, you notice these things that can be valuable. And I think that was part of what happened is the failure made him need to run lean when he was out of money, and find ways to run leaner and better. And to his credit, it's kind of on the same vein as that luck. I have people that are super smart. They're like professors and stuff, and they're somewhat self-brutalizing. And then they say, if I'm so smart, how come, this idiot is a billionaire and I'm poor? And the harsh answer is because you're a coward. And, people don't like hearing that. And they're like, well, how? I said, okay, well, there's 3 steps to being successful. One is like, you only get so many opportunities that pass by your face in a lifetime. Some people get some more, some people get some less, but everyone gets some. So step 1 is being able to realize you have an opportunity. Just recognizing the opportunity is tough. A lot of people don't, but a lot of people do. Well, the next step is, okay, you got an opportunity. Are you going to risk it? Right? Because an opportunity usually means Like you have to invest something, you have to invest some time, energy, money, something that you're committing to. And if you're comfortable making a professor's salary and you have a family and kids, you don't want to be uncomfortable. You don't want to risk your 401k. You don't want to risk, you're just too comfortable. So you're not going to, even though you recognize the opportunity, it takes some courage to do that, or it takes a lack of downside. Like that's why, startups are started by kids, that there's nowhere down. They've got nothing. So they've got nothing to lose. So it's easy to commit to doing something when you've got nothing to lose. But when you have something to lose, yeah, it's tough. And then the third big deal after committing to investing in it is actually succeeding at it, right? Like, all right, committed the money, whatever, and then you got to actually make it work, which is very difficult too. So it's all those three things, and there's only certain types of people that can convert on all three of those. And it takes a really kind of unique personality to do that upon failure, upon failure, upon failure. And I think it's John McEnroe used to have this phrase. They're like, he was a very awkward player in his style, and it's like, how do you decide to get your racket in? He's like, sometimes you just put your racket out there and hope. He's like, but good things happen when you try. If you don't try it, nothing's going to happen, right? And so I think there's a little bit of that kind of character in Jobs, where I think lesser people, very few people make it through all three of those steps to try, but when they fail, a lot of people will say that's it. And he just kept doing it, and and the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? Like at least you hope, if you learn something along the way. And he learned a lot through those things. But yeah, the weird thing is the history that's written on NeXT being a failure at the end is not true. It actually was cash positive towards the end in a very boring industry, like not the thing that he signed up for, which is database connectivity with DBKit as a back end into the front end of web development and stuff like that. It's cool for. It was not on Steve Jobs' top 10 list, but it's what was actually paying and, got him to a positive cash flow state towards the end there. And the reason that's important is he had to survive long enough for the next opportunity, for the Apple opportunity to land in his lap, so to speak, right? Because some random middle management dude reached out and said, "Why is B up for this when we have a way better operating system, right?" And so he did not spur that on, but once it landed in his lap, he certainly took the ball and ran.
Yeah. All right, John. We're actually over time.
All right.
Thank you for.
But it was easy to go over time. Super interesting.
Yeah, I don't really want to cut the conversation short, but we have this thing about like we're actually doing a real show now. So.
Well, I know, crazy.
Well, sorry, I can blab on and on. So hopefully it was somewhat not totally incoherent, at least.
It was very interesting, man. I always appreciate your perspective, but your perspective on this particular time and place is all but unique. So thanks.
Yeah.
It'll be cool to read the book and see how we all feel. Maybe it'll be worth another chat.
Well, it should be out just a few weeks.
Yeah. So we would just need to get it read. All right. So I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to say that's this week's Context Machine. I had to get over to the notes. So, if you have anything to comment, top professional.
It's a good thing we're serious about this.
Yeah, it's a very good thing. If you have anything to comment on, add, or question, write us at podcast@contextmachine.io. Our new email address. Be the first to land an email in it. Our bandwidth is provided by CashFly. The bass is by Dr. Boom, recorded just for this show. And who's our sponsor this week, Jeff?
Oh, that would be MacPaw's Clean My Mac.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, MacPaw.
Yeah, I love those guys. So that is that's all for this week. All right, John. Thanks for doing our work for us.
Yeah, that was super cool and super interesting.